So memory is really, there's 3 steps involved in remembering something. So the first thing that you have to do is encode information. You're constantly receiving stimuli from all of your senses, from all 5 senses, all of the time, right? Even when you're not paying attention to it. Like right now, you're probably not paying attention to what it feels like to sit on the chair that you're sitting on, but you are always receiving that information. So we first have to kind of make a trace, a memory trace, which is called encoding. And we do that by making meaning most of the time. So I'm talking here not about what we do when we're afraid or when we're exposed to something life-threatening, but under normal circumstances, we encode information by making meaning of it. So there's part of your brain that is responsible for taking all of these bits of sensory information and processing them, combining them, making sense of them, so that it's basically like fitting a puzzle together. And the next part of it, that's encoding. The next part of it is consolidating or storing that in some way. So memory has to go from short-term memory into long-term memory. And that takes place, again, in the hippocampus region of the brain, sort of sorts and makes sense of what's important enough to keep, to hang on to here. And certain parts of your experience do get stored into long-term memory. Not everything, but certain parts of it, certainly not everything. So you have these puzzle pieces, if you will, that you have already made meaning of in the encoding phase. And then they're stored in different parts of the brain. And they can be stored indefinitely for the rest of your life. You may remember certain experiences for your entire life. Long-term memory has almost unlimited storage, so you can really store a lot of different pieces and experiences that you have in your life. And then the third step, the step that we're often most interested in, is the act of remembering, or what's called retrieval. So that's the point at which you tell an experience, or you think of a past experience. And there are 2 ways that you remember things. One is purposeful. So I ask you, tell me about a past experience, and you search your mind and you can or can't remember it, but it's purposeful. You're looking for it. The other one is triggered or cued retrieval, and that happens when something makes you think of something else. So you hear a song and it reminds you of an experience that you had. You smell something and suddenly you're taken back to this previous experience. And those are important to understand because both of those things are happening for refugees when they're being interviewed. They're both searching their mind for past experiences, for events that they're being asked about, but they're also being cued to remember things. And sometimes remembering one part of an event gets in the way of remembering another part of it. But in essence, that's really what's happening when we're remembering. So first we're taking in the information, then we're storing it in some coherent way, and then we're able to retrieve it later. So I like to think of it, the analogy I find useful here is a puzzle. So imagine that you're constantly receiving pieces of a puzzle from your 5 senses. The hippocampus is the part of your brain that's looking at those pieces and saying, well, how does this fit with this? And does that go? Where does that go? And it's actually putting together the puzzle. And that is, in some ways, not literally, but in some ways, how your memory is stored, so that the pieces that fit together are linked in a way that makes it easier to remember them together. So that later, whether it's because something made you think of it or because you purposely tried to think of it, when you see this piece, it's easy to get to the next piece. And it's easy then to get to this piece and to that piece. And so again, you go through the act of putting together the puzzle. But that's one of the things that's really important to understand about memory is it is putting together a puzzle. It's remembering something is a reconstructive event. So that means you don't remember it like you look at a photograph and describe perfectly what's on it. You get these puzzle pieces again and you make sense of them again. But you make sense of them from your current context, not from what was happening at the time that the memory trace was laid down.